Ben Holloway woke at 3:16 a.m., his hand still gripping the frigid steering wheel. In his dream, or perhaps it wasn't a dream, he'd heard Lena call his name from somewhere far away. Ben. A sound so faint it could have been the wind, yet strong enough to make him gasp, his heart hammering. It could just be an echo from the past. It could be something else. But this time, the call carried a distinct feeling. She was still out there. Ben lowered his head, his forehead resting lightly on the steering wheel. On his lap lay a crumpled map with dozens of circles marked in red ink, each circle a moment of hope, then crushing disappointment. Endless solitary drives, calling her name into the wind, only to be met with deafening silence, each circle a gash in his soul. His hand flicked across the map, his eyes tracing familiar names: Hidden Ridge, Joshua Creek, Fossil Gulch. Each name echoed in his mind like a voice from another world, the world before his sister, Lena, vanished. 4 years ago, on a bright June afternoon, Lena and her husband, Jason Whitmore, left their small Las Vegas apartment for a weekend getaway. They chose the edge of the Mojave Desert. They took one last picture, posting it on social media. Lena smiling in the sunset, Jason's hand shielding his eyes, his face obscured in shadow. The caption read, "Just the wind and each other." Then they disappeared. No calls, no cell phone signal. The rented Cadillac SUV vanished from the tracking system. Search planes scoured the hilltops. Search teams combed every canyon and rock pile. No one found anything beyond tire tracks cutting across the sand, then stopping as if the world had simply ended there. The family crumbled. Lena's mother fell ill within the first year, her hair turning stark white. Ben, fresh out of the military at the time, was the only one who refused to sign the presumed dead missing persons form. He couldn't. Not for his sister. Not for Lenath, one who taught him to tie his shoes. The one who shielded him from his first beating. The one who hugged him tight the night before he enlisted and said, "I'll always wait for you to come home." He switched on the old tape recorder on the dashboard, the only thing left that preserved her voice. A recording from his birthday years ago. Lena's voice rang out, gentle but distant. "If you lose your keys again, I'm locking you out all night, you hear?" Then her laughter, the sound that once warmed their childhood home, now just a glimmer flashing across the bottom of an abyss. He turned it off. His fingers trembled. It was always the same. He'd never get used to that feeling of loss. The police had given up. He remembered last year's meeting when the Nye County Sheriff's Department officially moved the Whitmore case to the cold file. "We've done everything we can," an officer said, unable to meet his eyes. They didn't know anything. They didn't understand Lena. Ben knew better than anyone. If his sister was alive, she would never give up. And if she was dead, that death couldn't be senseless. It couldn't leave no trace. On the radio, a deep voice warned of a severe sandstorm approaching from the west within the next 2 hours. He looked out the window. The sky was pitch black, without a single star. The wind was picking up, bending the old cactus beside the truck, sand hissing in miniature cyclones. He lit a cigarette, then stubbed it out when he remembered how much Lena hated smoke. Over the past 4 years, he'd given up a lot. His job, relationships, even his dreams of having a family. Only one thing kept him grounded: Lena. And then, as if the universe had heard his last prayer, his phone vibrated. The screen lit up. Unknown number. Nevada. He hesitated for a moment. Then he answered. "Mr. Holloway." A man's voice, raspy and urgent. "This is Detective Arlo Reyes, Nye County Sheriff's Department. I think you'll want to hear this." Ben held his breath. This afternoon, a jogger with his dog discovered human remains at the base of Lauder's Bluff. Near them was a bracelet, engraved with J and L forever. Preliminary identification suggests they're Jason Whitmore's. The air in the truck seemed to freeze. Ben couldn't speak. "Mr. Holloway," Reyes continued, his voice slowing. "We think you need to come here right away." The night continued to pass, but now it was no longer silent. Something was stirring inside Ben, not hope, but awakening. A new vein pulsed in his weary heart, carrying memories, anger, and a promise never spoken aloud. If Lena was alive, he would find her, and if not, he would uncover the truth. Outside, the desert was beginning to rage, and in the darkness, the pickup truck roared to life, turned around, and plunged into the approaching storm. The off-road vehicle bucked and lurched, forcing Ben to grip the handle in front of him. On either side, scree fields and fine sand swirled like a yellow-gray fog, stinging his eyes. The driver, an officer in sunglasses, reflected the cloudless sky. In the back, 2 forensics personnel sat silently, hands resting on metal boxes containing their tools, like mobile coffins. Reaching the base of the bluff, they found the area cordoned off with yellow tape and marker stakes. The desert wind tore at the tarpaulins, making the fabric snap and flutter as if trying to rip apart the heavy silence. Ben stepped out of the vehicle, sand clinging to his pant legs. A few meters ahead, a blurred shape lay motionless under a silver tarp. The wind howled, pulling one corner of the tarp free, revealing part of the skeletal remains, camping clothes still clinging to the parched skeleton. Reyes waited, his face set hard, the hesitancy from last night's call gone. "We found it early this morning," he said, his voice lost in the wind. A jogger named Marlon Walker reported finding human bones and personal items. His dog just kept barking, wouldn't leave. Ben moved forward, head bowed, staring at the empty space where a face once existed. Nothing but an empty skull. But something made his heart skip a beat around the left wrist, half buried in the sand. A leather bracelet, darkened with age, still intact. Reyes crouched down, gently lifting the item as if afraid it would crumble in his hands. "J and L forever," he murmured, looking up. "You recognize this?" Ben didn't answer immediately. His throat was parched, as if he'd swallowed a handful of sand. He nodded slowly. "It was Lena's anniversary gift," he said, his voice not his own. "Jason's 30th birthday. She had it custom made." Reyes nodded, handing the bracelet to a forensics technician. Ben kept his eyes fixed on the remains, unblinking. For a moment, all sound seemed to vanish, only the wind whistling in his chest like a warning. "Are you sure?" Reyes asked after a moment. "It's Jason?" "No doubt." Silence. Then Reyes nodded to one of the forensics personnel. The man nodded, bending down to make notes on a clipboard. "We've done a preliminary examination," Reyes continued. "Small caliber gunshot wound to the forehead. No other signs of violence. No broken ribs or defensive weapons found nearby." Ben clenched his fist and asked, "Any tracks?" "Drag marks leading north from the bluff about 4 meters. Looks like the body was moved, someone tried to hide it." Ben looked up, eyes bloodshot. "What about Lena?" Reyes hesitated, as if anticipating the question. He pulled out a plastic bag, containing a broken hair clip with a few strands of brown hair. Ben recognized it immediately, the type Lena always used when camping. "Nothing else. No footprints, no blood, no sign of her. We can't draw any conclusions yet." Ben turned away, but Reyes followed. "Ben, I have to say this. We're not ruling out any possibilities. It's possible she was also a victim, but it's also possible." "No," Ben interrupted, spinning around. "You didn't know my sister. Lena doesn't kill people. She couldn't kill Jason." Reyes looked at him for a long time, then nodded slightly. "I hope you're right. But my responsibility is to investigate all avenues." Ben didn't reply. He looked at the remains one last time, then pulled an old photo from his wallet. Jason smiling beside Lena, his arm around her shoulder. The desert sun setting behind them. The last photo they posted online before vanishing without a trace. He clutched the photo tightly, the wind making the edges flutter as if trying to tear it from his hand. "Sis," he whispered, If you're alive, hold on. I'm coming." The police cleared the scene. Reyes got in his vehicle to return. But Ben remained, alone, in the sandy desert. He didn't know what he was swallowing, sorrow, wind, or a piece of his soul that had fallen from somewhere. But he knew one thing. From this moment on, Lena was no longer just missing. She was a suspect, and he would do everything to prove otherwise. In the distance, the wind whipped up dust, obscuring the sky like a veil hiding the truth. But Ben had seen it. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. That afternoon, Ben drove toward the outskirts of Las Vegas, through streets teetering between affluence and oblivion. Lena and Jason's old apartment was in a dilapidated complex, the walls stained and the lawn as barren as if it had been drained of all life. Still unoccupied, it sat gathering dust, like a sealed box burying an unfinished life. Ben stopped his car a block away, walking through the rusted fence. The spare key was hidden behind the fourth brick by the porch, just as Lena had said. "In case you forget your wallet in the house again, like always." His hand trembled slightly as he put the key in the lock. The door opened, the hinges groaning softly like a stifled sigh. Inside it was cool and dark. The smell of dust and mildew hit him. He quietly closed the door, standing in the living room, shrouded in time. Everything was almost unchanged. The wedding photos still hung on the wall, the wooden frame faded at the edges. A set of 2 glasses remained on the table as if waiting for their owners to return. But Ben noticed immediately. Someone had been here. The drawer under the desk was slightly ajar, not how Lena would leave it. A few photo albums had been moved from the shelf, out of order: wedding, honeymoon, camping trip. A very light shoe print in the hallway, dust not his. Ben turned on his flashlight, going down to the basement where Jason had a small DIY workshop. Each step creaked as if lamenting beneath his feet. The fluorescent light flickered when he flipped the switch. He began searching drawers, toolboxes, even lockers locked with old combination locks. It wasn't until he touched a wooden box hidden under a pile of tarps that Ben stopped. Inside were stacked files, bank envelopes, and bill saul in Jason Whitmore's name. He opened each envelope, each statement: personal loans, credit agreements with scrawled signatures, notes in red pen. Urgent payment priority, don't tell Lena. The numbers added up quickly: 12,000, 35,000, then 80,000. A total of over $450,000. Ben slumped into a folding chair, unable to breathe. He looked back at the wedding photo hanging on the wall upstairs, Jason's smile, Lena's gentle eyes. They weren't these kinds of people. It couldn't be. He plugged in Jason's old laptop, hoping it would still boot. The screen lit up after the fan word. Luckily, it wasn't password protected. In the deleted emails, he found a chain of messages with a hotel in Vegas. Penthouse suite, no unregistered companions. The booking name, J. Whitmore. Date, 3 weeks before the disappearance. In a temporary folder, Ben recovered a blurry selfie, taken with a phone Jason in purple light, sitting next to a heavily tattooed man holding a glass of wine. Both were smiling, but not the smiles of old friends. Something uneasy, force, like an unspoken contract. Ben zoomed in on the photo, looking at the tattoo. A triangular symbol over the letter M, drawn in black-blue ink. He vaguely remembered the symbol had appeared in several articles he'd read about criminal organizations operating underground in the medical and high-stakes gambling worlds. In a notebook Jason left behind, Ben found a handwritten list, ending with the line, "Deadline M wants his pound of flesh. M wants his pound of flesh." Those 4 words cut through his mind like a knife to the spine. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just debt. It was something deeper, more dangerous, an agreement paid with a person, no longer a number. Ben put everything in his backpack, leaving the house as dusk settled. The street was quiet, but something was wrong. He stopped, turning around. A black Cadillac SUV was parked 4 houses down, headlights off, tinted windows. No front license plate. He pretended to go back to lock the door again. As he approached the SUV, it quietly started, backing out of the space and turning left without signaling. Ben stood still for a long time. Everything inside him was churning. Jason wasn't the man he thought he was. Lena hadn't disappeared because of an accident. And now, he somehow had stepped into a game that wasn't his to play. But he wouldn't back down. He couldn't. He tightened the backpack strap, gripping the photo of Lena in his wallet, her hair tied up, her gaze direct. "Where are you? I'm starting to see the shadows of the people who touched your life." A light breeze passed, carrying the smell of gasoline, dust, and something old, like the tattered soul of this city. Ben walked toward his car, not looking back. Ben sat in his car, his back soaked with sweat despite the air conditioning running at full blast. On the open laptop, Jason's bank statements displayed a maze of cash transactions, but one stood out. A withdrawal at 2 a.m. in Pahrump, a town 3 hours from the Mojave. The ATM was next to a gas station near the old hospital. The security camera footage didn't clearly show Jason's face, but his build and the way he hunched over, then handed a wad of cash to someone in a white coat were unmistakable. The other person quickly turned away, walking toward a gray pickup truck without license plates. Ben tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Pahrump wasn't on any route Jason had declared on his leave paperwork. Small town, sparsely populated. No reason to gownless something existed there that shouldn't. 3 hours later, Ben stood before a faded gray building, the windows shattered, the sign barely legible. Nye County Medical Center, a hospital that had closed. According to records, due to lack of funds and personnel. But the reality was different. Locals around the area, when asked at the small cafe on Main Street, only shook their heads. An old woman whispered, "A lot of trucks come at night. People in hazmat suits, guards. But don't tell anyone I said that." Ben didn't say anything more. He just thanked her, left, and approached the building as dusk settled. The main door was chained shut, but on the side, an emergency exit was ajar as if someone had used it recently. He slipped through the opening, his small flashlight sweeping the stained hallways, the sagging ceilings, and the tattered posters about community health. The ground floor was nothing but dust and strange skid marks stretching from the waiting room to the stairs. He followed the stairs to the basement. The air here was different, thick with the smell of old disinfectant, rust, and something very close to dried blood. Many of the doors on this floor were locked with electronic keypads, but one room was ajar, the nameplate broken. Internal Archives. He pushed the door open slightly. Inside the room, the overhead light was gone. Only the flashlight beam swept over the rotting file cabinets, a few documents strewn haphazardly. But among them, Ben saw something unusual. No patient names, just numbers, blood types, and a list of functional organs. Liver, good. Left kidney, untapped. Corneas, pending transfer. On each file was a red stamp, processed or pending order. Next to it, the date, time, and room code. Ben's heart pounded. These weren't ordinary hospital records. This was a file repository, as if the human body was a product catalog. He flipped through the files quickly. A piece of paper fell out of one, a note in black ink. "Prep complete, Ari. Dr. Elias." Ben stopped. Elias? No first name, no license number. But someone named Elias had worked here or was still working for the organization behind this place. He photographed the document. His hands trembled slightly. A noise echoed in the hallway. Footsteps. Unmistakable. Someone was coming down to the basement. Ben quickly hid the paper inside his shirt, turned off the flashlight, and retreated into the shadows next to the file cabinet. The door creaked open, and he saw the beam of a flashlight sweeping through, accompanied by the murmur of a radio. "Check sub-level B3, motion sensor triggered at the side entrance." Ben breathed softly. Guards with sensors, not just an abandoned place. He waited a beat. When the footsteps receded, he quietly retreated, following the old hallway leading to an iron door. Luckily, It wasn't locked. The door led to the medical waste dump. He slipped through, landing on the dusty concrete floor. A utility drain opened ahead. He crawled inch by inch until moonlight shone in from a small drain a few dozen meters away. He crawled out, covered in filth, but his heart was still pounding. Sitting back in the car, Ben didn't start it right away. He turned on the interior light, pulled out the paper with the phrase Dr. Elias. The name wasn't in any records, but he knew if Jason had frequented this place and had given money to someone in a white coat, then Dr. Elias was the one who had touched the unimaginable. He looked into the distance, where the lights of the town flickered on the horizon. A hot breeze swept through. Inside him, it was no longer suspicion, but smoldering anger. He had just opened a door, and behind it was the entire underworld where Jason had slipped and where Lena might still be trapped. There was no light. There was no sound. Only a pungent smell, a mixture of disinfectant and dried blood seeping into every breath. Ben opened his eyes, but the first thing he felt was a throbbing pain at the back of his neck as if a piece of his skull had been carved out. Iron chains clanked as he tried to move. His wrists were chained to a cold metal pipe. The cellar, holding cell was so cramped that he could barely stretch one leg. The only light came from a flickering fluorescent bulb in the hallway behind the bars, creating shifting bands of light as if the darkness itself was breathing. He couldn't clearly remember what had happened. He only knew that after leaving the abandoned hospital in Pahrump, he had spotted the black SUV from the day before, this time parked next to a gas station. He decided to follow it. Not close, not carelessly, but enough to know that the vehicle wasn't moving randomly. He followed it to the state line, a desolate road, broken power poles, no cameras. The SUV stopped suddenly. Before he could brake, a hard object slammed into the window. The sound of breaking glass, then darkness came like a brutal fist. When he woke up, the first feeling wasn't fear, but disorientation. How long had it been? A day? Several days? No clock, no sounds from the outside world, only the dripping of something far away and the sound of his heart, beating with each anxious pulse. Then, from the corner of the room, a hoarse voice whispered, very softly, like wind blowing across the rim of an empty glass. "Ben?" He spun around. His heart nearly leaped out of his chest. A shadowy figure sat leaning against the wall thin, her hair long and disheveled, her eyes sunken. But he recognized her immediately, unmistakable. "Lena." His voice choked. She nodded slightly. A very thin smile appeared, then vanished like a mirage. "I thought you were dead," Ben said, his chest constricting. "I thought I was too." When the light was adjusted to a dim level, Lena began to speak. Her voice was even, without trembling, without fear, as if all emotion had been drained long ago. But each word was a knife stabbing straight into the reality that Ben thought he understood. Jason had died on the first night. They had stopped the car in the middle of the desert, dragged them both out. When Jason tried to resist, one of them pulled out a gun and shot him in the face. Lena screamed, then fainted. When she woke up, she was here. "They knew I was a nurse," Lena said, holding a blood-stained bandage, "and they needed someone to keep the warehouse running." "Warehouse?" She didn't answer immediately. She just looked toward the iron door at the end of the hallway, where the flickering light never went out. "Some people aren't killed right away," she whispered. "They're held back, sedated, kept alive, like a parts depot, waiting for customers." Ben clenched his fists. "And you? Clean wounds, monitor pulses, record biometrics, administer fluids. I used to resist. I did." Her voice trailed off. "They isolated me, injected me with drugs. Once, I didn't wake up for almost 2 weeks." Ben didn't say anything. He could see clearly the woman before him was no longer the gentle Lena of 4 years ago. In her eyes was something new, not toughness, but survival. Raw, tenacious, full of cracks. I was useful to them, Lena said. So they kept me. She pulled a packet of papers from behind a loose brick in the wall wrapped in medical tape. Notes scribbled everywhere. Numbers, blood types, organ condition, buyer names written in code, cash transactions, shipping schedules. I call it my survival ledger, she said, her eyes never leaving Ben's. If it gets out, this network will collapse. He took the papers, his fingers touching the dried ink, feeling as if he was holding the bones of truth itself. Have you ever tried to escape? He asked. She nodded. Once. It didn't work. After that, they beat me so badly I couldn't walk, injected me with something that made me forget the days. And now? Ben whispered. Lena looked up. In those weary eyes, for the first time, something flickered, not fear, not despair, but hope, however faint. Now you're here. This time we'll get out, both of us. Ben clenched his hand. In his head, the sound of gunfire, the images of Jason's remains, the false bank statements, all converged into one conclusion. This was no longer about finding Lena. This was war. And he, former soldier, had nothing left to lose. In the distance, footsteps echoed. Lena hid the papers in the wall, nodding to Ben. The light in the hallway flickered, signaling another night about to pass. But this time, in the darkness, something had come back to life. Will, and a small flame enough to guide them out of the dark. The meeting room was hidden behind the pharmacy, where the chlorine smell overpowered even fear. The eastern wall had a section of peeling paint, revealing rough concrete evidence that someone had broken through, then stopped halfway. Dr. Elias was a few minutes late. He wore thick glasses, his eyes sunken, his thin body swallowed by an ill-fitting lab coat. But his voice, though soft, was still sharp as a scalpel. Door B6 only opens for 30 seconds each time medicine is administered to holding room 4. And there's only one guard. Wednesday nights are Billy's shift. He's prone to dozing off after injecting himself with morphine. Ben sat with his arms crossed, his eyes never leaving Elias. He didn't trust him. Couldn't not, after all these years of being forced to work for monsters. But Lena was different. He was the first person to give me water after 4 days of isolation, she said, and the only one who dared to look into the eyes of the victims when they were being dragged away. Elias didn't reply. He opened a piece of paper that had been crumpled many times, spreading it on the metal table. On it was a map, the prison system, power station, archives, and especially the ventilation shaft leading outside if they went by hand. This way, Elias pointed to a corridor to the west. Leads to the old technical station. The iron door is rusted, only a mechanical lock remains. I have the key, the only thing I've been able to hide for 4 years. Ben raised an eyebrow. And then? Then we run, Elias said, his voice dry. Run far, run fast. To the power station on the edge of the desert. There's a satellite phone mounted in the wall. Lena hid it last year when she was fixing the medical storage room. Ben looked at Lena. She nodded. Every night, the three of them shared observations. The number of times the guards changed shifts, the time of the inventory check, the dead spots in the camera system. Elias was the only one with access to all areas. Ben listened in on the guards, using a calm gaze to hide his ears, memorizing every detail. Lena maintained everything, from the sleep of the victims to the room temperature, so that no one would suspect. Tension built like steam in a pressure cooker. Ben was impatient, always demanding to take action sooner. Elias was cautious. Lena stood in the middle, like the only axis preventing the two men from stepping on each other and bursting into flames. One night, in the pharmacy, Ben slammed his hand on the table. We don't have time. I saw Miranda. She's planning to relocate the goods to another location. If it goes past this week, there may be no one left here. And if we're careless, Elias replied, then 3 corpses will remain here, and the ledger will be burned in the medical waste incinerator. Ben turned to Lena. She was silent for a long time. Then she took a roll of gauze from the drawer, Inside was the paper that had been flattened, wrapped in a waterproof bag. "It's been here for 2 months," she said. "If you get caught again, everything will fall apart." But then opportunity came. The sandstorm had started in the afternoon, but by night the wind was screaming. Sand slammed against the walls like needles. The vents rattled, followed by a roar as if the earth was moving. Inside the underground camp, all operations were switched to standby mode. Fewer guards, minor equipment malfunctions, camera interference, just as Elias had predicted. When the clock struck 1:14 a.m., Lena retreated deep into the pharmacy. She rewrapped the gauze on her arm again, tightening it. Inside was the survival ledger, flattened and protected by 3 layers of vacuum-sealed nylon. A thin, light object, but carrying the weight of 19 lives. Ben stood in the spare bed warehouse, his back against a wooden cabinet. His right hand was holding a thin metal bar picked from an old bed frame, hidden in his sleeve. His breath was even, his eyes closed as if preparing to enter a battle, not with guns, but with memory and precise movements. Elias was different. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his lab coat. His hands trembled. A man who had performed heart surgery for 20 years now had to take a deep breath to calm himself. The dim light shone on his old face, reflecting both the past and guilt. He touched his chest pocket where the keycard was for access to the technical area. Lena had stolen it. Elias kept it. "This is it," he whispered. Lena was the one to fire the opening shot. While checking the pharmacy, she suddenly screamed, then collapsed on the floor. White foam poured out of her mouth, a mixture of baking soda and soapy water, which she had hidden. A technique she had used when learning first aid to simulate seizures. The scream caused a commotion in the medical area. A guard ran in, shouting, "Nurse Lena is in shock." Ben was hiding in the medical refrigerator. The door opened. He rushed out, delivering a blow to the guard's neck with a thin metal bar. He collapsed, without screaming. Elias immediately tied him up with 4 lines, stuffing a rag in his mouth. Lena wiped her mouth, adjusted her clothes, and straightened up. "It's starting," she said. Elias changed into the guard's uniform. With his thin figure and slightly hunched posture, he didn't look much different. Lena and Ben wore patient clothes, the thin gray type used for people preparing for surgery. Heads down, feet limping. They entered the main hallway of the center. Each step, each breath seemed to last a minute. On the wall were cameras, but they were currently interfered with because Elias had installed a fault in the auxiliary power station. The images were blurred, faces unclear. Another guard glanced over. "Transferring a patient at this hour?" Elias shrugged coldly. "Condition of number 34 worsened. Miranda requested transfer to technical area for monitoring." The guard clucked, not asking further questions. The sandstorm had made them tired, careless. They reached the side door, the entrance to the old technical route. A thick steel door, normally only opened in emergency situations. But today, Lena had the key, something Elias had hidden in a fake oxygen line 2 years ago. She inserted the key, turned it. A click echoed small, but in the heads of all 3 like the sound of a death knell. The door opened. The corridor on the other side was dark, cold, and dusty. "We're out," Elias whispered. No one spoke for the next 10 minutes. They walked through the long, narrow technical route. On both sides were water pipes and rusted electrical cables. Ben went ahead, holding the metal bar. Lena was in the middle, holding the ledger. Elias last. Once, a siren sounded in the distance. They hid behind an iron door, hearts pounding. But no one followed. It turned out that it was just a warning about strong winds at the power station. The further they went, the thinner the air became. The smell of mold, metal, was strong. But ahead, where the corridor curved, white light shone from above. It was technical door 3, leading to the ventilation shaft. Reaching the ventilation shaft. The first gust of wind hit their faces like a thin blade. Sand mixed in the air made each breath a battle. The tunnel leading outside was only as wide as a person, lined with rusty metal. The smell of mold and soil rose like corpses buried deep for many years. Ben went first, his right hand pulling Lena, his left hand supporting the walls to maintain balance. His left arm had been scratched since climbing into the narrow section. Blood trickled down his sleeve. Lena coughed violently. The dust was too thick. She tightened the pack of bandages, hiding the ledger in her shirt, hugging her chest. Behind, Elias crawled and wheezed. It started with a long beep, then a whistle, shrieking like a wounded beast. "They've found us," Ben muttered. He turned his head back, his voice stern. "Hurry!" In the distance, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed on the metal, the sound of guards. There was shouting, the sound of iron doors opening. The hunt had begun. They crawled for almost 10 more meters. The exit was only a few steps away. A white light ahead, the first light they had seen throughout the journey. But at that moment, the sound of gunfire. A figure blocked the exit. A guard. He raised his gun. Ben only had time to pull Lena down when Elias roared, rushing straight towards the gun barrel. He didn't scream, not a moan, only the sound of 2 shots. One hit his stomach, one hit his chest. Elias's body collapsed, hitting the guard hard, causing him to back down. In that moment, Ben grabbed Lena, kicked open the hatch door, and rushed out. "Elias!" Lena shouted, but the wind swept away her voice as soon as they crossed the hatch. Ben didn't stop. He knew that if they turned back, all 3 would die. They couldn't let Elias's sacrifice be in vain. The desert welcomed them with blinding sandstorms. Each step seemed to sink deeper into a vortex. The wind bent their bodies. Their eyes burned. Their throats were dry as coal. Ben covered Lena's face with his coat, dragging her step by step. Under their feet, the sand was blown into sharp ridges. Behind, the sound of gunfire faded. They didn't know if the soldiers were following. They didn't dare to turn their heads. They only looked towards the power station, a gray building amid the sand, a deserted place where Lena had hidden the only satellite phone in a broken brick wall. Lena staggered to her feet, her hand trembling as she searched for the brick that had been marked before. A dark brick. She removed it, each layer of dust falling like ashes. The phone was there. Lena turned it on. A green light appeared. Signal. There was a signal. That light shone on her sand-covered face, her eyes swollen, her lips cracked, but for a moment, radiant as if she had just touched magic. Ben slumped to the ground, his back against the wall, looking up at the sky covered by the storm. He closed his eyes. In his mind was the image of Elias, the one who had stood in front of the gun barrel without hesitation. Lena shakily pressed the call button. "My name is Lena Whitmore," she said, her voice hoarse as the wind. "I have evidence of a human trafficking organization. I am at coordinate." She finished reading, then released her hand. Ben squeezed her hand. "We're out," he whispered. Lena nodded slightly. Tears did not fall, they had dried up long ago. Behind them, the desert still howled. And Elias's blood now lying in the tunnel would not be forgotten. Freedom is never free. And they had just paid the price with everything they had left. The desert morning was increasingly hot. A temporary camp was set up on the edge of the Mojave containers interspersed with medical tents, equipment surrounded by gray camouflage nets. On a whiteboard, large letters read, Operation Rescue 19. Below, maps, escape routes, names encoded with colors and characters. Ben stood outside, watching Reyes, who silently led Lena into the FBI's armored SUV. He didn't understand why Reyes was silent. What feeling was tearing at Ben? Relief or fear? Lena turned around, her eyes quickly glancing at Ben. No smile, no tears, just a determined look, making Ben feel like he had just placed her in the hands of another fate. Inside the large tent, FBI officials arranged the survival ledger on the center table. They washed their hands with disinfectant to protect the evidence. The LED lights emitted a cold gray-white color. Everyone was silent. only the sound of pages turning pages full of names, dates, codes swirling into a web of crime, transfers, raw meat cash transactions, nameless doctors stamping confirmations locations not found in legal medical maps. An FBI captain whispered, "This is what they've been hiding for hundreds of reports, for decades." Lena sat next to him, holding the ledger close to her chest, her face cold. 2 red lines ran from the corners of her lips to her neck, blood that had dried after the pain of last night. She pointed to the table. Code A158. "This guy's left kidney was sent to Guadalajara," she said. "A few days later, the right kidney went to New York. I recorded the date and time of the withdrawal of a total of $200,000. As she spoke, reporters began to sneak around the area kept at a distance observation point. The sounds of recording devices buzzed through each lens. A female agent handed her a paper. "Do you want to remain anonymous?" Lena looked at it, then tore it to pieces. They looked confused, but she smiled. "I used to think death was liberation," Lena said loudly, startling everyone. "But I've learned how to turn life into a weapon. I'm not running anymore." The space was so quiet that even the wind outside the desert dared not blow through the tent. After the debriefing, the camp went into high gear. A task force wearing infrared glasses prepared to mobilize. Vehicles prepared, weapons checked. The plans were verified. Center A, where organ harvesting took place. Center B, where illegal medical records were stored. Malakito, the driver who transported the goods, appearing in the ledger, his last known address in a small town near the Mexican border, was confirmed. Reyes appeared last, looking at Lena. He bowed his head. A moment of silence among those who still believed or feared. Then he said, his voice neither happy nor sad, "We'll have at least 2 operational teams by tomorrow afternoon. Do you want to come along?" Lena looked at him. In her eyes was a ruthless determination. "I'll come on one condition. I don't cover my eyes. I face it. If I can save someone, I will save them." Reyes nodded. The night before the raid, Ben asked Lena, "Are you okay?" She stared at the sky of the tent camp. "Nothing scares me anymore. I'm just afraid of running away again." Ben sighed, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry for everything that happened. And Elias." Lena sobbed softly. The first tears in 4 years. "You know what? When I saw Elias take the bullet for me, I knew I had to keep living. Keep living to pay the debt with the rest of my life." The next morning, when the sun had not yet risen over the edge of the desert, the sky was dyed the pale gray light of anxiety that could not be named. The special forces covered the abandoned camp. Helicopters circled. Armored vehicles moved in formation. Soldiers in bulletproof vests crept through each layer of cracked earth like fire ants surrounding a termite nest. In the armored vehicle in the back, Lena sat between Ben and Reyes. She still hugged the ledger close to her chest, as if letting go would make everything she had survived for 4 years disappear. She hadn't said anything since getting into the car. Reyes quietly glanced over. He held out a printout, a statement from the American Medical Association on the new law, November 25, 2023. Recognizing the swapping of organs as a legally compensable loss, granting victims the right to re-identification. Lena read for a long time, her lips pursed. Finally, only a sigh escaped, thin as a thread. Late, but better than nothing. Ben put his hand on her hand. He was going to say something, then stopped. Sometimes silence is the only thing that can contain all that cannot be put into words. The operation began like a storm calculated to the second. Warning loudspeakers rang throughout the camp. Tracer bullets exploded as if tearing the desert sky. Agents poured in while cameras recorded every chaotic scene. Shackled patients were cut free. Staff ran amok. A few guards tried to fire back, then were subdued. 19 surviving victims were brought out. 27 suspects were arrested. But Miranda Voss, the mastermind, the coordinator of the entire network, was not there. An agent handed the security check file to Reyes on the scene. Her vehicle left here 11 hours ago. Destination unknown. No signal from her satellite phone. Ben tightened the strap of his helmet. She knew in advance. Reyes nodded. Or someone told her. They returned to the car. Lena didn't ask, just looked. Reyes was silent, then looked at Ben, but it was Ben who slowly shook his head. No one. Lena blinked, as if something had just broken inside, not noisy, not shattering, but smoldering to the point of suffocation. She turned to look out the window, the harsh midday light clearly illuminating the scars on her cheek. "It's not over," she said. "As long as she's out there, it's not over." From that moment until the end of the journey back, she didn't say another word, and no one dared to break that silence. The afternoon in Tijuana was sunny. The sun here did not scorch like the Mojave Desert, but it was still heavy, full of dust and human breath. The small street wound through the old market, reaching a cafe without a sign, the window painted faded blue, worn wooden chairs next to round tables. A place where anyone could walk in, and no one needed to ask anything. The woman in long sleeves walked in. Her hair was loose, her back straight, her gait so light that no one turned to look. In her hand, she carried no bag. Under the sleeve of her right arm, the fabric bulged slightly, just enough for someone who had survived to understand that she did not come here empty-handed. 3 weeks before, Ben had received a handwritten letter. The handwriting was Lena's, still square, slightly slanted, careful as the day she wrote menus to stick on the refrigerator. Inside was only a short line. "I still have a light to ignite. Don't look for me. If I don't return, just consider that I have done my part." No trace, no GPS, no credit card accounts used. Lena vanished as if blending into the dust, this time intentionally. Ben folded the letter, placing it on the wooden shelf. The thin paper was like a piece of memory that had just been found, now to be released again. He stood still for a long time, his hands at his sides, his eyes watching the curtain sway slightly in the machine's wind. In his chest, the pain was no longer the violent screaming of the early years of losing her, but a deep, smoldering crack, the kind of pain that can only come from finding and then having to continue to separate. He had traveled nearly half his life through the desert, through dark corridors with no way out, only to hear a name called, to see familiar eyes. And now, knowing that she was still alive in bone and blood, it was also the moment he was forced to respect her final decision. She didn't need him to protect her anymore. She didn't need to be rescued. She had become the person he had to admire. Ben breathed out quietly, as if afraid of disturbing something sacred in this quiet little room. "Sis," he whispered, his eyes still on the letter. "I don't know what else I have to do but believe in you." Then he turned, leaving the room. Not hastily, not clinging. She had chosen to go down a path that only those who had lived in darkness dared to enter. And he, the little brother of yesteryear, could only stand on the edge, quietly watching. Like the first time she sent him to war. Like the last time she said, "I'll always wait for you to come back." Now it was his turn to say that, even though maybe she would never return. At the cafe, Lena walked to the table near the window. Miranda Voss was already sitting there. No need for introductions. Lena knew that face too well, that thin, elegant face, the salt and pepper hair, the gentle eyes despite what she had done. Someone who had been a psychiatrist, who had stood on the podium, who had written books about altruism, then led a criminal network where people were butchered and sold piece by piece like meat. Miranda looked up, briefly surprised, but only for half a second. She smiled faintly, lifted her coffee cup, nodding as if meeting an old friend. "I thought if you escaped, you wouldn't bother looking for me," Miranda asked. Lena didn't reply. She pulled up a chair, sat down, placing her hands on the table. Her left hand was intertwined. Her right hand hung loose, but her fingers tightened slightly. Under the thin fabric, the tip of a cold metal syringe brushed against her wrist. No one noticed. The cafe was still noisy with the clatter of spoons and forks, the murmur of Mexicans chatting. Outside the window, sunlight spilled onto the glass in dazzling yellow streaks. Miranda tilted her head slightly, her eyes scanning Lena's clothes. "Really impressive. I didn't think you were alive. And even less did I think you were alive and wanted to see me again." Lena blinked. "Surprising? I just thought you shouldn't be alive anymore." Lena smiled very slightly, as if greeting an old ghost, as if saying, "Here I am." They sat in silence for 15 seconds. Then Miranda put her hand on the cup. "Did you come to advise me to surrender?" Lena didn't reply. "Or to kill me?" Still silent. Miranda exhaled, taking a sip of coffee. "Anyway, you're the bravest of the bunch. I gave you many chances to die, but you kept living. Stubborn. Like a mosquito in the desert." Lena closed her eyes for a second. Her eyes opened, no longer resentful, only a blur of weariness. But from that weariness grew something stronger than all else: determination. She slightly moved her right hand. The tip of the syringe was briefly visible in her palm. "You plan on using that?" Miranda asked, unafraid. "Do you know how long it makes the heart stop for?" 40 seconds, Lena replied softly. "I remember the dosage. I used it for patients in pain at the end of their lives." Miranda nodded. "You're still a nurse, even when killing someone." Lena bowed her head. "I'm not killing someone. I'm closing the last door on a darkness." A silence. The cup fell. The sound of breaking echoed like a school bell. But no one turned around. The waiter just hurried down to clean it up. The whole cafe continued as if nothing had happened. No one saw clearly what had happened. Only that, a few minutes later, the woman in long sleeves walked out of the cafe. Her gait was calm, not hurried, not hasty. She crossed the street, blending into the Friday afternoon crowd in Tijuana where everyone was in a hurry, no one asking anyone where they came from. Behind, an afternoon stood still. In a small cafe, a woman no longer moved, her lips still bearing the mark of coffee, her eyes wide open but without light. The wooden house nestled at the foot of the Ruby Mountains, where snow only thinly covered the ground in winter and the summer was not scorching. This land was quiet, far from the city, only the wind blowing through the pine trees and the sound of birds singing to wake up the morning. It wasn't too big, but it was enough for someone who had been through hell to call home. Ben stood on the porch, holding a warm cup of coffee. Through the glass, he saw his wife sitting with his little daughter at the table, the two laughing as they colored in a picture of a sunrise. The girl's hair was dark brown, slightly curled at the ends just like Lena as a teenager. Looking at her, sometimes Ben saw a slice of memory return, but no longer painful, only gentle. He called her Elena, after the name Lena used when signing voluntary medical articles in the past. It was how he kept her with him, not with sadness, but with life. 10 years had passed. No one knew where Lena was, whether she was alive or had rested in a distant corner of the world where the law could not reach. After the day the operation ended, she left a quiet period, no further messages, no addresses. And Ben, after months of searching, finally knew to accept. Some people do not disappear because they are taken away, but because they choose to disappear to keep the rest intact. He had once thought he could not start over, that life would only be journeys with no destination. But then he met Saraha veterinarian from Montana, who understood silent eyes better than explanations. She didn't ask much about the nights Ben woke up in the middle of nightmares, nor did she force him to talk about the woman who always appeared when he stared distantly into the fire. They loved each other in a gentle, gradual way, building a home that didn't need to be perfect, just real enough. Sarah brought Elena to him in the autumn 5 years ago, an autumn of much wind, but little pain. Ben didn't talk about Lena much, but Elena grew up knowing about the aunt who had fought for the truth to continue living. Each year, on June 7th, he took his daughter to a small corner in the pine forest, where he buried an iron box containing old newspapers, a blurred photo of Lena and Jason, and a letter he had never sent. He told Elena, "Your aunt is the one who taught Dad that. There are things in life that will never change if no one stands up." Some late nights, when the whole house was asleep, Ben sat on the porch, looking at the sky. The stars on the Ruby Mountains were no different from the stars in the Mojave. He used to sit under that sky, waiting for a call. Now, he only kept silent, not expecting news, not expecting a response. It was just a habito remember, not to cling. Even though he no longer searched, Lena had never left him. She lived in the eyes of his daughter, in the kind choices he made every day, and in the whisper no one heard. "Sis, I'm still here." The new life did not replace the past, but Ben had learned how to make those two things coexist. He was no longer the one looking for the truth in the darkness. He was the one keeping the light for those who had not had time to return. Surely you have passed through a region of memory that makes your heart ache not because you forget, but because you remember too clearly. Remember a name, a face, a sign that no one believes is real. And the pain of having to continue living while the one you love is still forgotten or misunderstood. If you have read this far, maybe you have also wondered, what would happen if someone refused to let go? If someone dared to go to the end of a disappearance, not to find the past, but to reclaim justice? The story of Ben and Lena is retold from true events that have occurred over the years, cases involving human trafficking, organs, and the silence of an entire system. We have changed character names, plot details, and locations to protect the identities of victims and survivors. But the truth in it remains intact. We do not tell this story for entertainment. We tell it to remember that. There are those who have turned pain into action. There are those who do not choose to be silent. And if one person, just one person hears, then that is salvation. If this story makes you stop and think, please share it, especially via WhatsApp, to someone you believe needs to know that. There is truth. There is justice. And there is hope. We cannot erase what has happened, but we can speak out so that the right things are not buried. Send this story. Maybe, somewhere, there is someone waiting, to be seen, to be heard, and to be believed.